The sun rose over the golden sands of Egypt, glinting upon the rippling Nile. Along its banks reeds whispered in the morning breeze, carrying secrets of life and sorrow. In a small clay house near the water, a mother held her baby close, her heart trembling between love and fear. Pharaoh's soldiers had been ordered to destroy all newborn boys of her people, but she would not let fear win. She had prayed, and in her prayer, a plan had formed. A basket woven of reeds, sealed with pitch, light enough to float but strong enough to carry hope. With gentle hands, she placed her sleeping child within, his tiny face peaceful, unaware of the danger around him. "Lord," she whispered, "let the waters bear him to safety." As the first light shimmered across the river, the basket drifted into the current, beginning a journey guided by unseen hands. Downstream, the basket glided between reeds and lilies, guarded by whispers of the wind. The river's gentle rhythm lulled the child in his tiny cradle of hope. God's unseen hand guided the current, steering him away from danger. Fish darted beneath, dragonflies danced above, and even the river seemed to hush its song, carrying this precious secret safely onward. No one yet knew that within that basket slept the future leader of a nation, destined to bring freedom where chains once clinked. The baby's sister followed quietly along the bank, her small feet barely leaving prints in the damp earth. She watched the basket drift and disappear behind tall reeds, her heart pounding with both fear and faith. She knew she could not speak, could not call out. All she could do was watch and trust. The air smelled of water and wildflowers, of danger and deliverance woven together. Farther down the river, the palace gardens shimmered in the rising sun. The daughter of Pharaoh came to bathe, her attendants laughing softly beside her. She had no idea that destiny was floating toward her, wrapped in reeds and faith. Her eyes soon caught sight of something bobbing among the lilies, glinting gold in the morning light. As she reached for the basket, her hands trembled with wonder. Inside, she found a child, crying softly, wrapped in linen as white as moonlight. Compassion filled her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. She knew he was a child of the Hebrews, yet something deep within told her this was no ordinary baby. "He shall live," she whispered, holding him close. Thus, the river's secret became a royal promise, and the story of deliverance began. The palace stood like a mountain of gold above the Nile, filled with music, perfume, and the flutter of silk banners. Within those walls, the baby from the basket grew beneath the watchful eyes of Pharaoh's daughter. She named him Moses, for she had drawn him out of the water. Though he played among marble halls and fountains, his laughter carried something deeper, an echo of freedom yet to come. Servants adored his gentle spirit, and even Pharaoh smiled at the boy who brightened every room. Yet at night, when the moonlight poured through the lattice, Moses would gaze beyond the palace walls toward the river, as if his heart still remembered its secret beginning. Years passed, and the boy learned quickly. He studied hieroglyphs with scribes, watched chariot races, and listened to the stories of gods and kings. Yet even as he wore fine linen and gold, his heart felt a quiet pull. Something in him longed for truth beyond the palace gates. The servants whispered of his kindness, how he gave food to birds and water to the palace workers when they grew weary under the sun. One afternoon, Moses wandered near the gardens where the river could still be seen glistening in the distance. Pharaoh's daughter joined him, her heart full of pride and love. "You were chosen, my son," she said softly, "for even the river obeyed destiny to bring you here." Moses looked up at her, puzzled but comforted. She smiled, brushing a lock of his hair aside, unaware of how her words echoed God's greater plan. In the evenings, music filled the courtyards. Musicians played harps and flutes while torches flickered against carved stone. Moses often stood beside the pillars, listening quiet. The melodies stirred something within him, a longing not for power, but for purpose. He wondered who he truly was, and why his heart ached whenever he saw the Hebrew workers beyond the palace walls, carrying stones under the burning sun. Late one night, Moses wandered into the royal balcony, where the moon bathed the Nile in silver light. He leaned on the stone railing and whispered a prayer he did not fully understand. God of the river, God of my heart, show me who I am. Far below, the water shimmered like a living mirror, as if heaven itself was listening. The same stars that once watched a mother's tears now glowed above the child she saved. The river's promise had not been forgotten. The years unfolded like the turning of papyrus scrolls, and Moses grew into a strong young man. The palace still shimmered with wealth and splendor, but his heart no longer found peace within its golden walls. He began to walk among the Hebrew workers, watching as they toiled under the lash of cruel overseers. The cries of the weary struck him deeper than any word could. He knew now these were his people. Each face he saw reflected the question that had long stirred in his soul. Why was I spared? One afternoon, he saw a guard strike an old Hebrew man to the ground. Something inside Moses broke. The same courage that once floated him down the Nile now surged through his veins. With righteous anger, he stepped forward, his voice trembling. Enough! The guard's whip froze midair, and for the first time the prince saw how power could wound rather than protect. That night, sleep would not come. Moses walked through the silent palace corridors, the torches flickering like restless memories. His heart ached with guilt and confusion. He had seen injustice and could not forget it. The palace walls that once felt safe now loomed like prison gates. In the stillness, he realized that truth often begins with discomfort, and that the God who saved him from the river might be stirring him again towards something far greater. The next morning, he returned quietly to the work sites. He watched the Hebrews lift stones with trembling arms, their backs marked by lashes. One of them looked up and met his eyes, not with anger, but with weary hope. Moses' chest tightened. He began helping them, carrying stones beside them under the burning sun. The soldiers laughed at the prince, working like a slave, but he no longer cared. In that moment, compassion became his true crown. That evening, Moses returned to his chambers and gazed once more at the Nile. The river glowed with the colors of dusk, gold fading into deep indigo. He thought of the mother who had placed him upon those waters and of the God who had carried him to safety. Now he knew life was never meant to stay within palace walls. The same hands that had guided his basket still guided his heart, calling him toward destiny. He bowed his head, whispering a promise. I will listen. The sun rose over Egypt with the heat of judgment. Rumors spread through the palace like wildfire. An Egyptian guard had been found lifeless near the Hebrew camp, and whispers pointed toward Moses. Fear tightened around him like a snare. The same palace that had once sheltered him now hunted him. Before dawn, he gathered what little he could and fled, his sandals pressing into the shifting sands of destiny. Behind him, the Nile shimmered faintly, a memory fading with the mist. Ahead lay the desert, vast, silent, and waiting. He walked for days beneath a merciless sky. The desert stretched endlessly, whispering of both death and deliverance. Hunger gnawed at him, thirst cracked his lips, but a quiet strength carried him forward. The same unseen hand that once guided his basket upon the river now guided his steps through the wilderness. Each night, the stars looked down like familiar eyes, reminding him that he was not alone. At last, Moses reached the land of Midian. There, beneath palm trees and a sky the color of lapis stone, he rested beside a well. As he knelt to drink, laughter echoed nearby. Shepherds arguing with young women who had come to draw water for their flock. When the men tried to drive them away, Moses rose, his weariness forgot. Strength born of justice surged once more within him, and he stood between the weak and the cruel, just as he had done in Egypt. The young women hurried home to tell their father Jethro of the stranger who had defended them. That evening, Moses was invited to share their bread. The stars glittered above the campfire as stories were exchanged. Stories of exile and faith, of strangers becoming family. And when one of Jethro's daughters, Zipporah, looked into his eyes, she saw not a prince or a fugitive, but a man shaped by mercy and purpose. Peace, at last, began to find him. Time passed in quiet rhythm. Moses tended sheep across rolling hills, the same hands that once held royal scepters now guiding gentle flocks. Each dawn began with silence and ended with song. The whisper of wind, the cry of eagles, the soft bleating of lambs. In the stillness of the desert, he learned humility, patience, and peace. But destiny had not forgotten him. The God who once saved a baby in a basket was preparing to speak again. This time, from fire. Morning broke over the hills of Midian, crisp and golden. Moses led his flock across the wilderness, following the bleating of lambs and the whisper of wind through thorny shrubs. He had long since found peace in his quiet life, but something deep inside him stirred restlessly, like a flame waiting to be born. As he guided the sheep near Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, a strange light flickered in the distance, a glow unlike the sun, alive with purpose. Drawn by the mysterious light, Moses climbed the slope, his heart pounding with curiosity and awe. There before him, a bush burned with brilliant fire, but the branches did not turn to ash. The flames danced like living gold, yet the leaves remained green and alive. Moses stepped closer, eyes wide, sandals sinking into the warm sand. He had seen the impossible, and the impossible was calling his name. Then a voice came from within the fire, deep, tender, and powerful. Moses, Moses. He froze. Here I am, he whispered. Do not come closer, said the voice. Remove your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Trembling, Moses obeyed, feeling the warmth of the sand beneath his bare feet. The voice continued, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. At those words, Moses hid his face, afraid to look upon the glory that spoke to him. God spoke again. I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. I will send you to Pharaoh to bring them out of bondage. Moses trembled. Who am I, he whispered, that I should go to Pharaoh? And God answered, I will be with you. The desert seemed to hold its breath. The flames flickered gently, as though heaven itself bowed to the promise that had just been made. When the voice grew silent, the fire still burned, steady and pure. Moses stood motionless, his heart racing yet filled with peace. The desert wind carried away the last echo of God's words, leaving behind a promise and a purpose. Slowly, he put on his sandals again, his steps now firm and sure. He turned toward Egypt, not as a prince or a shepherd, but as a messenger of freedom. The same God who had guided his cradle upon the waters would now guide a nation toward its destiny. The wind of destiny carried Moses back toward the land he once fled. His heart trembled, not with fear, but with reverence for the mission placed in his hands. Alongside him walked Zipporah, his devoted wife, and their son. The desert stretched before them, vast and golden, leading back to Egypt's shadow. Every step echoed with memory. The cradle in the Nile, the palace halls, the cries of the oppressed. This time he did not return as a prince or fugitive. He returned as God's chosen messenger. As Moses neared Egypt, his brother Aaron came out to meet him in the wilderness. The moment their eyes met, years melted away like mist in sunlight. Moses told Aaron all that God had spoken. The mission, the miracles, the promise of freedom. Together, they embraced, no longer just brothers by blood, but brothers in purpose. The journey of deliverance had begun. When Moses and Aaron entered Pharaoh's court, the air was thick with incense and pride. Pharaoh sat upon his golden throne, surrounded by guards and priests. Thus says the Lord, "The God of Israel," Moses declared, his voice steady and strong. "Let my people go." Laughter rippled through the hall like mockery. Pharaoh's eyes narrowed. "Who is this God that I should obey him?" The moment was heavy, but Moses did not waver. The voice that once called from fire now burned within his heart. Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he mocked their request. But God had given Moses a sign. Moses cast down his staff, and it became a living serpent, curling and hissing upon the marble floor. Gasps filled the hall. Pharaoh's magicians imitated the act, yet Moses' serpent swallowed theirs, a silent message of power beyond human grasp. Still, Pharaoh refused to yield. The first battle between pride and promise had begun. That night Moses stood upon the balcony of his lodging, gazing toward the dark Nile. He knew this would not be an easy battle, yet the stars above gleamed as if whispering assurance. The same God who turned water into salvation could also turn it into judgment if hearts remained hard. Behind him Aaron rested, and the city slept unaware of what was to come. The dawn of miracles and warnings was drawing near. The morning sun shimmered across the Nile, gilding its surface in amber light. Fishermen's nets hung silent, the air heavy with dread. Moses, now a man seasoned by desert winds and divine encounters, stood upon the riverbank, his staff firm in his hand. He had pleaded for Pharaoh to listen, yet Egypt's pride had silenced mercy. With Aaron by his side, Moses stretched forth his staff toward the waters. The river rippled, darkened, and turned to blood. The stench rose, fish floated lifeless, and panic spread through the streets of Thebes. Yet Moses' eyes remained steady, not in vengeance, but in sorrow. "This is the sign," he whispered, voice steady and low. "Let Pharaoh see that the Lord alone is sovereign." Behind him, Aaron bowed his head, and the crimson river reflected both heaven's power and humanity's stubborn heart. But Pharaoh's heart did not yield. The plagues continued, each one a message wrapped in warning. Frogs poured through the streets like a living tide. Locusts darkened the skies. Hail crashed upon Egypt's golden fields, breaking stalks and pride alike. Still, Pharaoh's will remained iron. Within the throne room, Moses and Aaron stood once more before the king, who had once been their brother in upbringing and now stood as their adversary. "How long will you harden your heart?" Moses asked, his voice echoing through the gilded chamber. "The Lord calls for freedom, not ruin." Pharaoh's jaw tightened, his crown catching the torchlight. "Go from my sight," he hissed. Yet, as Moses turned away, a shadow of doubt flickered in the king's eyes, a glimmer that mercy had not fully died. Night fell heavy over Egypt, deeper than any before. The Hebrews gathered in their humble homes, their hands trembling as they painted lamb's blood upon their doorposts. Moses' voice carried softly through the alleys, firm yet tender. "Do not fear. The Lord will pass over you this night." Candles flickered like stars against mud-brick walls as mothers held their children close. In the stillness, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Far off, thunder rolled, a sound not of storm, but of justice. Inside every home, hearts beat in prayer and trust. The same God who once guided a baby upon the river now watched over his people once more. Deliverance was near. Dawn would bring not sorrow, but freedom. Before dawn, the cries of Egypt filled the air, a wailing so deep that even the wind seemed to weep. Pharaoh, broken by grief, summoned Moses and Aaron. His palace, once a monument to pride, now echoed with loss. "Go," he whispered, voice shaking with the weight of surrender. "Take your people and leave this land." Moses stood in silence, eyes heavy with compassion. Freedom had come, but at a cost. As the sun rose, thousands of Hebrews began their long journey, their bundles on their shoulders, their children walking hand in hand. The desert ahead glowed with promise. Behind them, the walls of Egypt faded into memory. A land of bondage left behind, and a dawn of purpose yet to come. That evening, the people camped beside the Red Sea. The air was cool, the horizon endless. Fires flickered across the sands, and for the first time in generations, songs of hope rose into the night. Moses stood upon a ridge, staff in hand, gazing across the waters that shimmered under the rising moon. The wind carried whispers of gratitude and faith. "Lord," he murmured, "you who drew me from the waters, now draw your people into freedom." The sea shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting the starlight of promise. In the stillness, Moses felt the same peace he had once known as a child upon the river. A peace born not of safety, but of surrender to a plan greater than his own.